a dual need, a need for myself as an individual to realize my total potential, in a sense of speaking. A part of me wanting to render itself to humanity. That's why we have the message music.
Maurice White's life, marked by profound tragedy, was far from the perfect image he projected as the founder of Earth, Wind and Fire. From a lonely childhood and being unfairly labeled a musical disappointment, to battling a debilitating disease that prematurely ended his career, White faced a series of heartbreaking challenges, yet he managed to keep his struggles largely hidden from the world. This video uncovers the tragic events that shaped his life, including the hidden truths about his romance and marital life with his alleged wife, Marilyn, revealing a side of the legend that few knew existed. Tragedy struck in March 2012 when a big controversy hit the entertainment news. Popular songwriter and creator of the black music band Earth, Wind and Fire, Maurice White was charged to court by Charles Stepney's children for failing to pay thousands of dollars in royalties to the music producer who produced some of his band's biggest hits. The controversy had another twist. The producer in question had been dead for over 30 years. Even with the large uproar, Maurice White remained adamant. He insisted that he did not owe his late producer and friend a dime and called on the court to dismiss the case. The news toured the airwaves for weeks, and news reports called it the most tragic event for Maurice White, but this is not true. Several years ago, 2 years before White created the band Earth, Wind and Fire, and while he still played the drums with Ramsey Lewis's trio, he met a Hispanic cashier named Marilyn. He immediately fell in love with her. Luckily, Marilyn fell in love with him too. There was only one problem. Marilyn was a married woman. Did her married status stop this risk-loving songwriter? No. Barring all risk of controversy, White plunged headfirst into a whirlwind romance with his married lover. When they met, 28-year-old Marilyn was unhappily married to a brute who was 10 years older than she was. Her husband, Salvador, was Elvis's hairdresser. But those details didn't deter White at all. Marilyn was depressed, but couldn't get a divorce because no one in her family had ever divorced. In an interview with Dr. Marissa Pay, Marilyn explained that she had only accepted the job of cashier in the store where she met Maurice White to get away from her husband. She described the first day she met White as electrifying. He barely looked at her at first, and even though other members of the band tried to talk to her, he never spared her a glance. But when he finally did, she said, "A fire licked me up from inside out, and the flame would move from his eyes to his mouth, and that smile would bring tingles all over my body." White asked her out to dinner, and when she told him she was married, he asked her to bring her husband along. Marilyn would later meet him alone that evening. They spoke and connected immediately on their shared love for jazz. Their whirlwind romance would have produced a best, as Marilyn described, a passion that prompted them to tour cities together, go on rides down the coast, and even buy a home in Carmel Valley. However, even with the electrifying romance between them, White still saw other women extensively, which later put a huge strain on their relationship. Marilyn said that he often came home with the scent of other women on him. His activities with other women yielded results when, 4 years after he met Marilyn in 1974, White's first child, Hamia White, was born. It was rumored that Hamia was not the daughter of his lover Marilyn, and this was confirmed in his memoir, where he named another woman, Evelyn Carter, as his first baby mama. Even with their strained relationship, Marilyn found herself with a child, and she gave birth to his second child and first son, Shane White. Contrary to many reports, Marilyn and White were never married. Marilyn explained that she rejected his first and only proposal while pregnant because she was still traumatized from her first marriage. He said that although he had 3 children from 3 different women, he never married. Adding to the thick controversy that already surrounded his love life, he also confessed that the mother of his last child, Eden, a Caucasian woman, was in fact his soulmate. Other women White was rumored to have dated included Jennifer Holliday, Chaka Khan, Angie Stone, Denise Williams, and Wanda Smith. But of all these women, his rumored relationship with Angie Stone seemed to ring true, as their chemistry often on stage was too electric to be forced. This rumor lasted the length of the 1990s, but neither of them ever confirmed it. In his memoir, he confessed that his relationship with the women in his life was one of his deepest regrets. He wished he had eventually settled down, but the top of his regrets was his flimsy relationship with his children. Marilyn confirmed that he was never around, and she had to raise his son alone. She recounted how nervous he was even to touch his baby after he was born, worried that he would hurt him. White's lonely childhood must have played a massive role in this. He tried to build a relationship with his children 6 years before he passed. His tragic childhood. White grew up alone with his grandmother in the projects in South Memphis, Tennessee, and they were poor. The projects were low-cost homes populated by poor and struggling black families. Even though his mother was married to a doctor and saxophonist, Verdine Adams, they lived far away in Chicago for the bulk of White's life. He did not have a father figure or role model. Though his grandmother was hard-working and religious, White struggled as a kid. He lived in a neighborhood where substance abuse was common, but he didn't indulge. He worked his first job as a paperboy, delivering newspapers on the doorsteps in white neighborhoods, so he came face to face with racist actions that changed the trajectory of his life. One particular incident left him traumatized for years. One unfortunate evening, his route led him through a predominantly white neighborhood. He was cycling along, delivering the newspapers as usual, when a cop car pulled beside him. White was a teen when this occurred, but his age did not stop the cops from attacking and hurling racial slurs at him. They were thoroughly physical with him and even tore up his papers. In his memoir, White wrote, "When they finally stopped, they calmly got in their cruiser and slowly drove off. I could hear their laughter fading as they got farther and farther away. Once I got up, I just stood there, sweating and shaking in the cool evening air. I had urinated on myself. I vowed that if I got stopped again by the police, I would run and cut through somebody's backyard. The fear haunted me for several months." True to his words, White lived with an unsettling fear of cops and authorities before he finally moved to Chicago with his mother, Edna Parker, and his stepfather. His love for music was born in the walls of his grandmother's church, with the hymn and the drums, but that love and talent were consequently harnessed in the Chicago Conservatory of Music. However, the music scene was not conducive for Maurice White and other black artists, but White was determined to make it work. So, after several years of playing the drums for clubs and chess records, he joined an all-black trio that had Ramsey Lewis as the jazz pianist. He played with this trio for 10 years before creating his own band in 1969 with his brother Verdine Adams, who later changed his surname to White, and 9 others. The band was called the Salty Peppers before it was later changed to Earth, Wind and Fire. When their appearance in the scene did not cause as many waves as White had hoped, tragic events. The band, Earth, Wind and Fire, kicked off with giddiness, but was suddenly riddled with several difficulties. Judging by statements made by his band members, especially Philip Bailey, who wrote a memoir, Shining Star, White's authoritarian style of leading the group birthed several problems. It became so bad that White eventually called for a hiatus of the band's activities in the mid-1980s. But before this became a problem, the band struggled to find their feet in the deep sea of the entertainment world. Determined to make it work, the band spent hours in studios, recording their self-titled debut in 1971 and the album The Need of Love, which was released the following year. These 2 songs flopped much to the chagrin of White, so he did something quite controversial and drastic. He fired every member of the band. All 7 members of the band, except his brother bassist Verdine White, were removed. He replaced them with 9 new members. Vocalist Philip Bailey was one of such members, and by 1974, the revamped band finally made EWNF's first major hit, Open Our Eyes. But White's problems were far from over. One of the changes White made to the group was introducing a female singer, Jessica Cleaves, increasing the group's vocalists to 3. However, this decision birthed the next problem. White had to battle Jessica Cleaves, who proved to be quite difficult to work with. In Bailey's memoir, Shining Star, he said that Cleaves began calling off shows and missing performances, but that was not the worst of her offense. According to him, Cleaves also struggled with substance abuse. Even though she finally left the band on her own terms, Her battle with substances must have irked White badly, as he didn't seem to have any loving memories of the singer. While Bailey described Cleves as a sister and the sweetest thing with beautiful eyes and great voice, White, in his own memoir, wrote rather coldly that Jessica had substance abuse issues, and she wasn't going to last long in the band anyway. Jessica Cleves was the last female member of the group. After she left, Maurice refused to recruit any other females and insisted on keeping it as an all-boy band. However, this decision did not protect the band from more problems. Tragedy struck in 1976 when White's good friend and producer of all of EW&F's songs, Charles Stepney, suffered a heart attack while they were recording their album, Spirit. 30 years later, Charles Stepney's children will reopen the band's activities in a fierce court battle over royalties. But in that sad month in 1976, White was devastated. His friend had been ill, but had seemed to recover. They had all hoped to get together again, but that was not the case. While mourning his friend, White wrote that no matter how death comes, sudden or not, it's always a shock, and Step's death was so abrupt. On July 16, 1979, just 2 years after Charles Stepney's death, White was plunged into mourning again. His dearest mother died. Despite the constant tragedies, the band finally became popular in the 1970s, but it was at this point that White's high-handedness began to create discontent within his band. In 1980, his guitarist Al McKay became angry over the unfair manner in which cash was shared between Maurice White and the rest of the group, and soon he and White suffered hostilities. In his memoir, White wrote, "Al had had it with my leadership. We were clashing hard and had some serious heated disagreements. It got so bad that a few times we had to take it outside so as not completely to ruin the vibe in the studio." After a particularly heated argument while they toured South America, McKay announced that he was quitting the band. In the end, he changed his mind and decided to stay, but this does not stop White from firing him shortly after when he refuses to fly to their next show in Mexico. According to Bailey, other members of the group mourned his departure, all except White. After McKay left, the other members became more brave in expressing their discontent. They claimed that White was too authoritarian in his control, especially since he refused to apply any of their ideas or suggestions. White stubbornly maintained firm control of his band. He explained that some of the members did not fully understand his vision and ideas, which added to their frustrations. In an effort to broker peace, he tried to meet with each of his bandmates personally to calm things down. However, things continued as they were. While all this was happening, White was getting increasingly discontent with his sound in the band. While making what would become the last EW&F album for years, White realized it was time to do something different. In his book, he described feeling like a large dam was placed on his creative juices. He began tinkering with the idea of striking out on his own and achieving a certain individual status for himself. In 1983, everything came full circle when their album Electric Universe flopped. The band went from selling out shows to simmering in deep discontent in their studios. And so, a frustrated Maurice White made a risky decision that caused lots of uproar in the industry. He put the band on an indefinite hiatus. Unfortunately, this decision was made so suddenly that all members, even his own brothers, were caught off guard. White made the announcement very casually one afternoon at his home in Bel Air. "The band is on hiatus. We had worked together for over 12 years. It's just time to do things on our own. I don't want to be forced to do an album because of a contractual obligation. We'll probably do something together again, but I don't know when. Maybe at the end of this year, maybe next year, who knows?" It was like being thrown out in a blazing storm. The members had no other means to make a living, and some of them even had to find jobs outside the entertainment industry to survive. White did not fare any better. His solo acts were not received as lovingly as he had hoped. The New York Times of 1984 called him a disappointment, stating that though his solo album was loaded with pop hit potential, both singles Stand By Me and I Need You were pop fizzles. It went on to announce that Maurice White had become more active as a producer, producing songs for Neil Diamond. It ended this announcement by wondering what a hip R&B rocker was doing working with Mr. Middle of the Road. But his going solo also resurrected new conversations about his age. White was known to hate any references to his age. In an interview, he made his displeasure quite clear. "I don't mind being my age," he said, "but age can be a problem in this business. It can limit you." But the rest of the band suffered the worst of it. Some even lost their homes and fortunes and had to accept therapy after suffering nervous breakdowns. Even the relationship between the two brothers, Maurice and Verdine, suffered badly for the first time, so badly that they barely spoke during that period. The band's percussionist, Ralph Johnson, explained to CBS News how and why he suffered. He said, "'Cause this is all we knew, this is all we had, so when somebody kind of pulls that rug out, you're like, now you've got to rethink your whole program." However, White also had to deal with the collapse of his label, the American Recording Company. The label was established in 1978 when EW&F was making waves. The studio failed because it was too dependent on the band. Once the band's foundations shook, the company shook as well. White's controversies did not end there. He faced a spat with popular artiste Barbra Streisand. He helped produce 3 songs in her 1984 album, Emotion. Even though his songs received the most praise, White was not satisfied. Apart from the fact that none of the songs were released as singles following the original plan, he later realized that Barbra had snuck back into the studio and changed the songs. In an interview, White expressed his anger. "You change my work, at least have the courtesy to let me know. Finding it out months later in a book isn't the nicest way to find out." He stated that he would only work with her again if he was allowed to produce the whole album. In the late 80s, something good finally happened. The band came back together. The old members reunited and even recorded an album together. But just when they began settling into the newly found camaraderie, tragedy struck again. One of their former members, saxophonist Don Myrick, was shot and killed by a Santa Monica police officer in 1993. Myrick was mistaken for a substance dealer by the cops while they searched his apartment. There was a struggle after they forced their way into the apartment with a strange key and without permission. The cops claimed to have assumed Myrick was armed, but it was only a butane lighter. All of this must have reminded White of his traumatic past, and it was some months before he could get himself back together. Antoinette Merrick's mother took the city to court with the support of the band and was awarded a settlement of $400,000. Soon after this incident, White's health completely deteriorated. While talking with CBS News, Philip Bailey explained what it was like for him to discover that White was terribly ill. "It was a few years that we walked it down together. It took a lot of courage for him to finally get to the point of really even saying this is what it is, because we were all hoping that it perhaps might be something else, something that you might be able to be treated with this or the other." His battle with Parkinson's. White was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's is a terrible illness caused by the degeneration of nerve cells in the part of the brain called the substantia nigra, which controls movement. Once these nerve cells become damaged or die off, they lose the ability to produce dopamine. It gets worse over time, so it is known as a progressive neurodegenerative condition. Being an international star with Parkinson's challenged the songwriter. He had to live on a strict diet, which was hard to maintain on tours. It was also a huge blow to White because he was particularly health conscious. He did everything right, so to speak, but good health still eluded him. Because of the positive outlook in life, it was not until the early 90s that White finally let his band members know what was wrong with him. In 1994, he stopped touring and performing live with the band, which was the first time that EW&F performed without him. However, in March 2012, when Charles Stepney's children sued him for failing to pay royalties he owed their father since 1970, when the band's first album was released, White did not fail to stand up for himself, insisting that no such promises were made. He remained adamant in his decision not to pay a dime, as he wasn't about to be railroaded into acting against his wishes. While the case still made news topics, in December of that same year, White endured his last controversy. His death rumors began circulating online early on Friday, December 21st, 2012, that the soul and R&B singer had passed away. Rumors were so real that the editors of Wikipedia edited his Wikipedia page to include December 21st, 2012 as the day of his death. Even rising star rapper Q-Tip, believing the story, expressed his sadness on Twitter, writing, "Maurice White, one of my heroes. R.I.P." However, the false rumor was laid to rest when representatives of EW&F released a formal announcement on the group's official Facebook page, dismissing the death rumors. The message read, "Maurice White is alive and doing well. The rumors across the web are false. Please spread the word." The false alarm was a relief to fans like Q-Tip, who quickly deleted his tribute tweet. Wikipedia editors also corrected White's page. However, the respite was temporary. On February 4, 2016, the rumors finally came to pass. White died in his sleep at his Los Angeles home, losing his battle with Parkinson's at the age of 74. Thanks for watching. Subscribe.